Hi, in today's video I'm going to show you how I make the in the hoop reindeer ornament that you can find in my digital Etsy shop. It's linked below. And this, I have several ornaments in the shop, but the reindeer is probably the most popular one. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial from start to finish showing you how I set up my design and how I actually put it together on the machine. In the file folder that you download from Etsy, if you've purchased this design, you'll find two different folders. One is blank that you can add your own name and your own personalization to. The other says Merry Christmas on it, in case you don't want to put anything personal on it, or maybe you don't have editing software, or you just really want to keep it simple. So I give you two options. So for this one, I'm going to show you how I put the name in my design. I'm using the Premiere Plus from Viking Husqvarna software, in case you're wondering what software I'm using, and this is the full suite that includes the digitizing. I use the Viking Husqvarna software because it's compatible with the Mac, and I don't need to use Boot Camp or any other hard drive partitioning software in order to get it to run. So what I want to do is I want to add my lettering. So I go through the alphabet. I use the alphabet tab here, and I pick a nice, easy to read font, and I want to make sure that I keep it kind of small. So I would recommend about 12 millimeters or half an inch. That seems to fit well into this design. So I'll just type out my name and plug it in, and then we'll see how it fits. If if it doesn't fit very well, then I can go back, I can delete it, and maybe increase it a little bit, maybe decrease it, depending on what you need. So now that I've finished adding my lettering, I'm going to go to my color select panel, and then I need to go up to the top and combine my design. Since I added the wording, and it automatically puts it at the bottom, so I'm going to have to edit. I'll go ahead and leave it red. I'll have to edit the order and move it up, because right now if I saved this the way it is and exported it to my machine, it would do all of the design and then the very last put the lettering in, and you don't want that. You need to put your lettering in sometime before you add your backing. It really, for this design, it doesn't really matter what order you're putting it in, it just cannot go last. So now I just need to simply select my lettering, which I left red, and then I'm hitting my arrow key so it's moving it up. And I'm gonna put it, if you can see where the green is, that's that outline, and I just went ahead and added it underneath. But again, with this design, it doesn't matter. You can have it anywhere except the very last step. Or make sure your name is above the last two steps if you're going to keep the sewn eyelet and not set your own. So I'm going to go ahead and change this so that the name matches the same color as the nose. I kind of like to keep my die lines and my cut lines different than the other things in my design. That's just the way I've done it for a long time, and I still continue to do that. As you know, once it's time to sew this, what is on the screen on the computer is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the color of thread that you put in the machine. At this point, you're ready to export your design. So just give it a name and save it to your computer, your USB, or whatever you use to transfer your files. So I'm going to show you quickly one other thing I do whenever I make my own ornaments. I prefer to set actual metal eyelets rather than use the one that I've provided that is a satin stitch that goes around. So I'm going to show you quickly how I do that. I just isolate I go back into my software, into my editing tab, and I'm going to isolate that part of the design. So I'll just click off the little pieces. I'll hide them, hide the little pieces like the outline and the antlers, and then get my selection tool, and I'll select it and then delete. And then after I do this, I'm ready to go back and do exactly what I did before with the exporting. I go up to my file, export, name my design, whatever, and then save it to my USB. And then I'm ready to take it to the machine. Now I'm ready to set up my hoop, and it's time to start sewing. So in this design, the first thing you sew is the text box. And right now I'm doing the die placement line, and this is going to show me where I need to put my fabric for the applique. So we'll go ahead and let the machine go all the way around, and then it's going to stop. And now I'm going to just lay my fabric over top of it, make sure that it covers the lines that you just sewed. And the next step is to tack it down. So the machine's going to go all the way around the same lines that it just sewed, and this is going to tack my fabric down so that it doesn't move and I can trim it. Now once it gets all the way around and the machine stops, I'm going to take the hoop off of the machine. Do not unhoop your fabric. You're only removing the hoop from the machine. Now this is happening off camera so you couldn't see it, but I took my applique scissors and I went all the way around my design. Make sure that you take your time and you trim as close to the die line as you possibly can, because you'll see here in just a minute I left a little piece that I had to go back and try to fix afterwards. It's easier if you just do it right to begin with and not have to fix anything. So just let that machine finish the satin stitch around your text box, and then you'll move on to the name or Merry Christmas, whichever design you're doing. And when I made mine, I always put the name right after I finished this satin stitch on this text box. But again, like I said at the beginning of the video, it doesn't matter where you put it as long as it's not at the end. You could do the whole thing and then come back and do the name. It doesn't matter. I just like to keep things in order if I can. So after the text box is finished, then you move on to the face of the reindeer. And just like the text box, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that placement line or that die line. And this just lets you know where you need to put your fabric. So now that your machine has stopped, you need to grab your fabric. I like to use felt on these designs. I don't have to worry about it raveling so much. So that's my preferred fabric for the applique on the ornaments that I make. So now I'm gonna put my tack down line. So just like the font or the text box, it's gonna go around the outline of the reindeer head, and it's going to tack that down, and then I will remove it. Again, do not remove this from your hoop. You're only taking the hoop off the machine. So now that we've, through the magic of television, I have trimmed all the way around it, did a better job on the head than what I did on the text box, and I'm going to go ahead and continue with the rest of the design. So the next thing it's going to do is sew the antlers. And then you'll have a few other color changes before we ever get to the outline. So after the antlers, then it stitches the inside of the ears, and then we go to the satin stitch. So this is really one of the easier designs. There's only 2 pieces of applique to it, and if there's any of my designs that I would say would be best for a beginner, it would be this one, because your pieces, like I said, there's only 2, and they're fairly big, not difficult to cut out, and it's a quick design. I think on my machine the total stitch out time is like 7 minutes. And of course that doesn't count the time that you have to stop the machine, trim, all that stuff. But total sewing time is pretty quick. So now for the applique, you're done, essentially. You just have to finish all the rest of that fill stitch, which is the nose and the eyes. Okay, so this is how I do the very last step. I remove my design from the machine. Do not unhoop it. That's very important. If you do, you're going to mess it up. So I turn it over on the back, and you can see my backing. And since this burlap is, the weave is kind of thin, I use an extra layer underneath of felt. So I have 505. This is the spray that I normally use. And I just give it a quick spray, cover that, spray again. And all I'm doing is floating the underlay. So this is what you have to do in order to get your ornament so that the front and the back are together. So then I'll just lay it down and just kind of press it a little bit, and then I'll take it back to the machine and I'll meet you back over there. Okay, so now I'm going to put it back on the machine, and I keep my hand underneath to kind of make sure that I don't, get it up underneath where it's not supposed to be. So I now have, I'm going to tilt this down so you can see it. So right there I have my underlay on the underside, and then I'm going to stitch the two pieces together. So let me get that straightened back up. And this is the final stitch. If you remember in the first part, I cut out the where I had the eyelet, where I had the eyelet program, but I don't want that. So let's see, let me change this to number 3. So I don't want a red outline. I want it to blend. So I changed my thread. Okay, that's it. It's completely finished, and I'm gonna have to figure out what needle that was in. Okay. And you can see it's completely done, and it is stitched on the back. So front and back are put together, and now I'm gonna take it back over to my table and trim it and put the eyelet in. So I can now, since I have it completely finished, the front and the back, I can unhoop it and get it finished up. I'll go ahead and pick out all these little extra threads that got tied up in my machine, but I can do that afterwards. And I'm also going to go back and use my little scissors. This is why I like using the larger hoop, because it's not easy sometimes to get in around this felt to trim it like you need to get it close enough to your stitches. So I'll separate the eye, trim off that jump stitch on the ear. Okay, so now I'm gonna just trim it. I want to cut fairly close to my stitches, but not close enough that I actually cut through it. And you don't have to use burlap. You can use any fabric you want. I've seen pictures from customers that have done this all with felt. That's a possibility. I've made this myself with quilter's cotton and frayed the edges to make it kind of that country, shabby chic look. And that turned out nice. So it's up to you. You can use whatever you want. Okay, so let me move the scraps out. And then for the eyelet, I use a Crop-A-Dile, a leather hole punch, and one metal eyelet. So I made the pattern so that you could, you know, sew it in a satin stitch if you wanted to and you didn't want to go this route, but I like the way it looks with the set eyelets. So I just get out my largest hole punch I have for this leather punch. And then just put my eyelet in there. I use my Crop-A-Dile. And there you go, that's it. So let me trim a little bit closer. And try not to trim too much. But that is the finished ornament. So you can see the back is sealed, everything is sealed inside, so you don't see any of that, and we have the full applique on top. So I will just finish that off with a little ribbon, and then it's ready to go. Let me do it this way. Okay, so now it has its ribbon and it's ready to be hung on the tree. So that's it. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. Thanks for watching.